Yesterday, my son cried in my driveway, not when his father died, not when I was hospitalized 3 years ago. He cried because I burned 12 family photo albums. At 85 years old, I stood in front of my fireplace and watched 40 years of birthdays, weddings, Christmas mornings, and baby pictures turn into ash. And while my son was begging me to stop, I kept feeding the fire. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't dementia. I knew exactly what I was doing. In fact, it was the clearest decision I've made in years. My son looked at me like I had become someone unrecognizable. He said, "Mom." Those were our memories. And I almost laughed because those albums stopped being memories a long time ago. They became something heavier, something that followed me for decades, something that slowly turned into evidence of everything I gave up. For most of my life, I believed those albums were love, proof, meaning, something sacred I was building for my family every birthday, every Christmas, every small moment. I documented everything. I carried a camera everywhere. When my son took his first steps, I stayed in wet grass for nearly an hour trying to capture it perfectly. When my daughter smiled on Christmas morning, I spent money meant for myself on film because I was afraid of missing anything. I told myself, this is what a good mother does. But now I can see the truth more clearly. Those albums weren't just about love. They were also about fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of becoming invisible. Fear that one day my children would move on and I would no longer matter. So without realizing it, I turned memories into proof. Proof that I sacrificed. Proof that I mattered. Proof that I should not be forgotten. The moment everything changed happened last Thanksgiving. The whole family was there. The house was loud, full, busy, but I had never felt more alone. Phones buzzing, television on. People moving through rooms like they didn't fully belong in them. Everyone present, but no one truly there. That morning, I repaired one of the old albums by hand. I thought it mattered. I thought they would care. I thought this year would be different. So after dinner, I carried it to the table like something meaningful, something still alive, but nobody looked at it. My son was answering emails on his smartwatch. Someone else laughed at a message. Life moved forward around me while I held something from another time. Then he pushed the album aside and said casually, "Mom, nobody uses photo albums anymore. These things just take up space." That word hit me harder than anything else. Space, not memory, not love, just space. And that was the first crack. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet, too heavy. I sat alone in front of those shelves of albums, and suddenly they didn't feel warm anymore. They felt like weight. And then a thought came that I couldn't escape. I couldn't remember the last time I did something that wasn't for someone else, not as a mother, not as a caretaker, not as a memory keeper, just me. So I opened one album, then another. At first I smiled. There I was at 20 years old, alive, light, still believing life belonged to me. But as I turned the pages, something painful became clear. I wasn't looking at my life. I was watching my disappearance. At 40, I looked tired. At 60, anxious. At 70, like someone waiting for something that never came. And I realized something deeper. I didn't lose myself in one moment. I gave myself away slowly over decades, thinking it was love. So yesterday, I carried the albums into the living room one by one, and I almost stopped because for the first time, I wasn't looking at albums anymore. I was looking at versions of myself I had abandoned. And I asked a different question, not, what will I lose if I let go? But, what have I already lost by holding on? That question changed everything. So I lit the fire. The first album burned slowly. Pages curled. Faces disappeared into smoke. And instead of grief, I felt relief. Because what was burning wasn't memory. It was pressure. The pressure of needing to be remembered in order to feel real. And then came the deepest reversal. I wasn't losing my identity. I was finally separating it from my sacrifice. For the first time in decades, I wasn't the waiting mother. I wasn't someone measuring her worth through giving. I was just there, breathing, existing, without performing. That night, my son called again, but his voice was different, quieter, careful. He asked, Mom, if the albums are gone, how are we supposed to remember you? And I finally understood what he was really asking, not about photographs, but about whether I still existed in his world. So I said, if you want to remember me, don't look for me in the past. Look at me now, while I'm still here. There was silence, not anger, not rejection, just silence. And then something unexpected happened. He didn't hang up quickly. He stayed longer than usual. And in that silence, I understood something important. When you stop using sacrifice to hold people emotionally, they don't move away. They finally see you. This morning, I looked at the empty shelves where everything used to be. And for the first time, I didn't feel loss. I felt space. Space to breathe. Space to exist. Space to become someone beyond memory. So now this was never about burning photographs. It was about finally realizing I don't have to disappear in order to be loved. Even at 85, especially at 85. The albums are gone now, reduced to ash. But I am not living inside what I gave away anymore. I am living inside what I still am. I am Margaret, still here, still alive, and finally free.